I want to bring in my guest. We're joined with Dan Kovalik. He's an American human rights, labor rights lawyer and peace activist. He's also a professor at the University of Pittsburgh. Daniel, man, welcome to the show. How you doing today?
Hey, good. Thanks for having me. I do want to make one correction. I actually don't teach at the University of Pittsburgh anymore. I lost my job because of my position on Russia and Israel. So there you go.
That is unfortunate. I guess I'm in the club with you on this one. I also lost my job at the radio station. So I feel you on this one. I'm hoping that the sanctions and everything else are relieved. I'm hoping that our tenor towards Russia changes. Our tenor towards the Middle East is, however, remains ghastly. Joe Biden floated this plan to effectively evict the Palestinians out of the territory. Trump is going with the idea saying this is for humanitarian reasons. And on some level, I get where he's coming from. The entire place has been fundamentally destroyed. I think 80, 90% of the living situation is just gone. Israel has turned it to glass. It's a bit rich that Trump is arm in arm with the people who did it, effectively saying, hey, for humanitarian reasons, I want these people to move. Do you think he is going to be able to affect this? I mean, Egypt is effectively saying no. Jordan is effectively saying no, but at the very least, King Abdullah came to sit across from Trump to get across that no, even if he didn't necessarily say no outright. Do you think this is going to be something that's going to take place in that, Egypt, Turkey, Jordan, that these countries are effective, Saudi Arabia, are going to allow this forcible eviction, because that is what it would be, a forcible eviction?
I'm very hopeful that they won't allow it. It does appear, look, I think all the countries you just mentioned totally failed in helping Gaza and defending Gaza during the 15-month-long genocide that at least now has a pause. I hope it's more than that, but at least has a pause now. Mm-hmm. It seems that they are prepared, if there's a round two, to stop it, to try to stop it. I think that, Trump's words, his claim that the U.S. was going to take over, kick out the Palestinians, and basically turn Gaza into like the Las Vegas of West Asia has inadvertently, united the entire Arab and Muslim world. And I say Arab and Muslim because it also includes Iran, which is Shia and tends, to be the odd person out in West Asia. But even now, Saudi Arabia and Iran seem to be united on this. So Trump has done what no one has been able to do before. Not Nasser, not Gaddafi. He's united the entire Muslim world against the U.S. and Israel. So, unintended consequences.
Yeah. I want to show you a clip. This is from CNN. Scott Jennings gets into a fight, and I want your take on this fight. I went and gave my take on it, I believe, yesterday, but let's get the take of an expert. And here we are.
Yeah, a couple things. Number one, the reason we're here with this hostage situation this weekend is because Hamas decided to stop participating in the deal that was brokered as Donald Trump was coming into office.
Actually, the Israeli newspapers today says that Israel violated the ceasefire.
I know what your position.
It's not my position. It's the Israeli newspaper and the New York Times and Israeli politicians.
But our ally is Israel, and you can't trust Hamas.
But our allies violated the ceasefire.
Who started it in the beginning? Who started it in the first place?
Israel violated the ceasefire, killed 100 Palestinians. During the ceasefire,
finish, and then you can.
Yeah, a couple things.
Israel violated the ceasefire.
Give me your take on that. I am super curious on your take on that. For one, Jennings is wrong. Even New York Times points out, I mean, it took 9 paragraphs for them to get to it, that even Israel sources point out that Israel violated the ceasefire agreement. So Jennings is entirely wrong here. But that argument is the argument that is often made and is being made now as Donald Trump is effectively saying, hey, release the rest of the hostages or else. Give me your take. What are your thoughts?
It's very clear that Israel, by the way, never abided by the ceasefire to begin with in many ways.
Mhm.
And there's a list of things Israel has not done. First of all, some emergency housing was promised to be brought in. I think, if I'm not mistaken, 20,000 units. None of those have been brought in. Okay. Only 10% of the tents that were promised have been brought in. I think 20,000 out of 200,000, something like that. Very little water's gotten in. That's a big issue. I mean, water's been prevented from getting in to Gaza. Obviously, a huge issue. Also, a very small percentage of the humanitarian aids promised per day have gotten in. So that's for starters. In addition, as the one commentator you just had on alluded to, Israel has killed a number of people within Gaza. And of course, as this has been going on in Gaza, Israel's taken the opportunity to attack the West Bank, killing scores of people in the West Bank, illegally destroying homes there, and arresting more people in the West Bank than it has released as per the ceasefire agreement. So, I mean, to say that Israel has honored this in the breach, I think, is the accurate portrayal of what's happening.
I agree with you. And the West Bank is one of those issues that seem to be flying under the cover. I'm stuck with this kind of weird situation on this. I look at this and I think to myself, this is a humanitarian disaster. This disaster has been going on for like 75 years, if not longer. And after October 7th, I kept thinking to myself, okay, well, we can't go back to a new norm, or we can't go back to a norm. Like, to have something like this take place and then go on for 15 months, basically a genocide in every sense of the word. How do you go back to what led up to it in the first place? And I kept thinking to myself, something different has to take place. Or give me your take on this. I mean, is something different going to take place? Are we going to reach a new norm? Like, how do you see this shaping up going forward?
Well, again, I think the future is very uncertain. We stand at a precipice at the moment. A lot of people fear that the genocide will continue this weekend, if Hamas does not release the hostages that Israel and the U.S. are demanding be released, or the war will continue. So that could happen, though. I've been seeing some possible good news that Israel and Hamas have been talking in Egypt, and that some of the disagreements between them may be working out, may be getting ironed out. This could go either way. This could go back to genocide and, yes, the forcible expulsion of the Palestinians, or I pray that this ceasefire will continue. And I do think, though, that the big X factor, excuse me, has been the Arab response to all this. And they seem to be getting a backbone that they have not shown up till now. I mean, Egypt has moved tanks to its border. And Egypt has the legions to take on Israel if it decided to do that, and Israel knows that. Yes,
I guess, yeah, that's super interesting. I guess my question will be, how does this ultimately end up? And I guess there's no way for you to know that. And meaning, I know in asking that question, there is no certain way of knowing how this ends up. But I guess my feeling of it is, do you expect something different to come out of this going forward?
I hope so. I mean, I think in the medium to long term, yes. I mean, in the medium to long term, I don't think Israel will survive this. I don't think Zionism will survive this. Its reputation has been irreparably destroyed. Israel has existed on the basis of some key myths for years. That it's the eternal victim, that it's the moral army, that it's the good guys in all this, that, whatever violence it does is only in retaliation for the violence done to them. All that's a lie. And that's now been exposed as a lie, not just in the global South, but also in much of the West.
Mm-hmm.
And without those myths as its foundation, I think as a society, it cannot last.
But
yeah.
No, I was just going to say, but from their point of view, they're acting as if they are the victors, meaning from their point of view, they see we've expanded in Syria. We have effectively we have a moment where we may be able to expel these people out of the region. We have a president that's going to back us in doing so. We have a president that is vocally backing us in doing so, entirely giving us weapons also. We are expanding further into the West Bank, meaning from their point of view, we've exerted more control and we've taken more territory than we've ever had. And on top of that, we've decapitated Hezbollah. We have put Iran in somewhat of a corner. Meaning, if you're right, and this is the end of Israel, from their point of view, they're not seeing it.
See, I do think, though, that a number of officials in Israel do see it. Mm-hmm. It is true. They have taken land in Syria. They have taken land in South Lebanon. They have made gains, if you want to call them, in the West Bank by massacring people and taking their homes.
Yes.
But I do think that military experts see this as all ephemeral. This is not sustainable, and that is the problem that Israel has, right? That they, and that's why they have this desire for the greater Israel to take over parts of Syria, Lebanon, Egypt, Jordan, even Saudi Arabia, because they know that they are outnumbered. They know that it's only constant conflict that allow them to maintain themselves, but it's not sustainable, And for example, I just read yesterday that there are some Israeli officials who admit that Hezbollah is stronger than ever now. That yes, they took a beating. Yes, they lost their longtime leader, Nasrallah, but that they've regrouped, they've rearmed. So I think people looking at things realistically know that Israel is isolated in the world and that their enemies are not as weak as they'd like the world to believe. And
No, please continue. I'm sorry.
New enemies. That's the other thing. Egypt has been their friend. They've been, for years and years and years. Sisi has been a puppet of the West, and yet now he won't even meet with Trump. He won't meet with the president of the United States. That is huge. There is something happening. The world is changing, and I think Israel, again, is going to be left out in the cold. That's my view. Now, in the short term, obviously, Gaza is not safe. I mean, the truth is, if Israel decides to start up the war in Gaza, especially if it's just merely an aerial campaign, which I think it probably will largely be that, there's nothing Gaza can do to stop that, and they just have defenseless population living in tents.
Right.
And so that is the danger. The short term is the danger. I think medium to long term, it's Israel that's in grave danger. And I even think the U.S. eventually is going to have to cut Israel loose. Because,
Well, that leads to a question. It's a question that is often posed, and I guess I don't know if I've posed it to you before. Is this the tail wagging the dog or the dog wagging the tail? Because there's an argument to be made that everything that Israel is doing is at the behest, on some level, of the United States. That it's not, oh my God, the United States is so weak and it's a puppet. It's the U.S. is affecting its political agenda by supporting a settler colonial state in the heart of the Middle East. Like Joe Biden said, if Israel didn't exist, we'd have to build it. Okay, so who is pulling the strings on this? Is this pulling the strings from the standpoint of Netanyahu to Trump or from the U.S. to Netanyahu?
The truth is, I think there's some push and pull there. I think that you're correct that, in general, the U.S. supports Israel's colonial project for the reason you say, because it's also the U.S.'s colonial project. Israel is a proxy for the United States in West Asia, as Ukraine is a proxy for the United States in the West, on the borders of Russia. But that's not to say that Israel doesn't have some influence going the other way. Because Israel and Netanyahu, I do think at times have influence over the details of how that colonial operation is going to be carried out. And I do think the U.S., again, I do think even Trump understands that the U.S. reputation is on the line in West Asia, that it is losing its political and diplomatic influence, that it's hated in many ways. And it's becoming hated around the world because of its continued support for Israel. And so, I think that in terms of whether, for example, the genocide continues in Gaza, I'm not sure. I certainly think there is a tension within the U.S. halls of power whether they want that to go on again, because it is not good for the U.S.'s reputation. And again, if Egypt gets it, look, what Trump wants, he wants normalization of relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia and other countries in that region. If the genocide, restarts, and you lose not only Saudi Arabia, but you lose Egypt, for example, then that entire project's been destroyed. And I think the U.S. has to see that. So, this is where I think, Netanyahu risks something in restarting that. I do, does that mean the U.S. will stop supporting Israel? No. But I think Israel and Netanyahu may disagree over whether that massacre in Gaza should continue. And this is where there's some push and pull there. And where it may not be that the U.S. can simply say don't do it and he won't do it, because his own political life is on the line, his own freedom is on the line, right? Because he may go to jail for corruption. The only way he survives is continuous warfare, whether the U.S. truly wants that or not. But if he does it, I think the U.S. will back him. That's the other thing, and he's going to gamble on that. I hope that answers your questions. But
no, it does. That's unfortunate, because that means the killing continues. I did see that there were back channel communications between Hamas and Israel.
Yes.
I don't know what those back channel communications are whether they're fruitful in their entirety or not, but there does seem to be, at the very least, talking. And maybe you're right. I mean, Donald Trump did get in saying, I'm going to end the war. I'm going to stop the war. I'm going to stop the killing. And he was able to effect that, 5 days before he even took office. So very true. It may be this kind of situation where this is not something he wants, but this may be something he accepts just because I got $100 million from Miriam Adelson. I have all sorts of lunatics that are in my administration that are Zionists in the way that they see themselves, the framing of it, like unabashed. So he may allow it to go on, even if he doesn't necessarily want it to go on, if that makes sense. I think
that's the conundrum that is faced. I mean, some people say Trump wants a Nobel Prize. And that's one of the reasons he wanted the ceasefire in Gaza, So, I think there's for what he's doing. And so to me, if I was forced to predict what's going to happen, it would be impossible for me to do that. I think the next few days are going to be very crucial, really crucial.
Tell me, how do we solve this? I am stuck with a dilemma on this, and dilemma. It's like I'm not there, so who cares, right? But my dilemma is, I don't want the forcible expulsion of anybody from anywhere. I think that's outrageous, and that seems to be what he's postulating. By the same token, I also don't want people living in tents in an area that has been fundamentally destroyed. And I wonder whether the issue that I'm really grappling with is that Israel won. That ultimately this settler colonial project won and is there to stay. And that moving people into, let's say, other areas where they may be safe, where they don't have to deal with the bombing, may be a better alternative, as opposed to these people being killed by a tyrannical fascist regime, Israel, is my issue that they want. Less so about the outcome, meaning, I'm saying that poorly, is my issue more so that I don't like this notion, and that many people don't like this notion, especially on the left, and especially look at this as a genocide. We don't want Israel to get what it is trying to get, which is Gaza and the West Bank. And that the forcible expulsion makes it clear that they won in brimmingly clear terms, which feels so unacceptable in looking at it. By the same token, I don't want people living in tents. I don't want people bombed in tents. And is it just this fig leaf of mine of I don't know if it's ego, I don't know if it's self-righteousness, where it's like, it is wrong for them to be removed, as opposed to, is it a better outcome if they are? I hate saying that.
Yeah, well, I think it's very clear to me that the Palestinian people, first of all, don't want to leave, or they would have left already. I mean, the fact that you have Palestinians moving back to the north, they've moved back to the north, which has been utterly devastated, which Israel drew a red line on in the Nesserine corridor, saying we've got this now north of this corridor, and the Palestinians went back anyway at great risk to themselves. What it shows is the Palestinian people want to stay there. And if that's the case, then they should stay there. Okay. So, if the Palestinians were clamoring to go to Egypt, I suppose that would be on the table, but they're not. They don't want that. Number one. Number two, I think it should not be an either or. I think that the U.S. and Israel are duty bound to rebuild Gaza because they were the ones that destroyed it. They broke it, they bought it, so to speak, but they don't own it, right? And so they need to reconstruct it, but the people of Gaza should not be forced to leave for that to happen, right? And they know, because the Palestinians know once they leave, they ain't going back, right? They knew that with after the Nakba, they all kept their keys, they all hoped to return. It never happened. And they know it won't happen now. So they want to stay put. So if Trump wants to rebuild Gaza, God bless him, but he's going to have to do it around the people who are living there. I can't go to your house and burn it down and say, hey, for your good, you have to find another house, and I'm going to rebuild your house and live in it. I think that's a non-starter. And that's really what's being said. So,
yeah, I burned down your house, and now and that's what I mean, right? It's like he is arm in arm with the people who've done it, who've destroyed all of this.
Correct.
And that's the other thing, I guess. The other question: how does this? If we had a rational, fair, let's say, president that wasn't so obsequious to Israel in the way that the presidents have been. Let's say Richard Nixon. Nixon gave this really great speech on this idea of there's a difference between Israeli priorities and American priorities, and that needs to be understood in a president as they govern as a president of America. And that speech was like, yes, thank you. Yes.
Isn't it sad, by the way, that Nixon looks pretty great compared to the yahoos we have now? I mean,
yeah, he does. That's what I mean, right? Like Nixon is the one you have to go back to get some kind of sane rationality on this issue.
Right.
But what is a rational way to end this? And I ask this because I've had Israelis on the show. I interviewed Benjamin Netanyahu's, I think press secretary or something like that. And those are maddening conversations. But one of the things that comes out clear is we do not want a two-state solution. There's that. Meaning we don't want a Palestinian state, if we're being honest. We don't want it. That's not something we want. That's not something we care about. That is off the table. But they would also say we don't want a one-state solution either, because that would mean it's not Israel. It's not a Jewish state if we allow other people in with self-determination and one man, one vote and those type of things. So we don't want that either. And so then I'm stuck with, okay, so what do you want? Either you kill everybody or you kick everybody out. Both of those things are gruesome. Neither of those things seem like it's possible to even do. So how do we solve it? And I'm always stuck with that.
Yeah, no, I think the resolution has to be a one state that is multi-ethnic, multicultural, one person, one vote. Just like, and again, why is that so controversial? That's what the U.S. has. That's, we have a constitution that we're so proud of that, memorializes that. We claim that that's what we want for the rest of the world. We invade other countries claiming that that's what we want to impose on others. We criticize countries like Iran for having a theocracy when in fact they have less of a theocracy than Israel does in practice. And I understand that the Israelis by and large don't want that, but too bad. That's like the slaveholders in the South of the U.S. saying they don't want to give up their slaves, or apartheid South Africa, the whites saying we don't want to give up power. Too bad. There's rules in the world. There's norms that need to be followed, and the Israelis are free to stay there, but they have to stay there as part of a state where they don't get to rule just by virtue of the fact that they're Jewish. They have to rule because people elect them, including Arabs and all the Arabs who live there. So, and that's what's going to happen. I don't know how long that's going to take. I don't know if that'll happen in my lifetime, but that's where this is going to end. It's not sustained. The two-state solution's gone, and it's gone because Israel destroyed it. Where in the heck would that second state be? Gaza? No. The West Bank that's pockmarked by these settlements? No. Israel intentionally destroyed any two-state solution. So they're going to have to live with the one-state solution where it is not a Jewish state. Period.
And you think we're going to see that?
Again, I don't know if in our lifetime, but I do think it'll happen. I think my children will see that. Yes.
Do you think that's the only solution? And the reason I said the only solution is
the only proper solution. I mean, yes, there's other solutions, and again, as far as Israel's concerned, they want to just get rid of the Palestinians. That's always been the goal, but that's not proper. That's not. And by the way, when that's their only goal, they've forfeited their right to exist. I'm sorry, you cannot. You can't base your entire existence on the desire to displace millions of people and all of them. It's over. The Zionist project is over. The Israelis haven't gotten notice of that yet, but it's over.
Can you tell me what's taking place in Israel right now regarding things like the economy? Because that's the other issue, right? If you are in a place that you feel unsafe, meaning feeling unsafe is an issue, especially if you're trying to build this kind of, there are like 8 million people in Israel, give or take. I think 1 million left during the war, or as the war has propagated, they went back to their homes in Europe or back in the United States in New York. What is going on economically in Europe? in Israel? Because I would imagine with the number of Palestinians that are no longer working, the number of Israelis that left, the number of people who, let's say, couldn't go back to their jobs because they were in fear of a missile hitting somewhere. That is also an issue for Israel if it indeed will be a viable state and a viable option. What is going on the ground? Do you know?
Yeah, it's not good. I mean, their economy is in very bad shape. Thousands of companies went out of business. As you say, we don't really know all the numbers, but yeah, it could be 1 million Israelis who left Israel and are not expected to go back. As you say, I thought the number was more like 7 million Israelis, but even if it's 8, it's a huge percentage of the population.
Yeah.
Yes, they depend on Palestinian and Arab labor for farming and construction, and that's not happening because of the war. The one port, I'm forgetting its name, was destroyed by Yemen. They're in very bad shape. And that's the other reason why Zionism effectively is dead, because the whole premise of Zionism is that Jews need a state of their own where they can be safe and prosper. Well, that's not Israel. It's not safe there for the Israelis living there. It's not prosperous, and it's not going to be prosperous anymore. I don't see how they get out of this economic hole. I mean, they're just living off of the billions and billions of dollars the U.S. gives them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, been great for them. But that's not sustainable. They can't live on handouts. And their domestic economy, if they were left to their own devices, that economy would collapse. So, I think they're in bad shape. And again, that's why, another reason Netanyahu needs war, because once the smoke clears, the Israelis are going to say, boy, things aren't so great here. And also the U.S. is going to say, well, we'll give you the 3 or 4 billion we give you every year, but we're not going to give you the tens of billions we've been giving you if the war isn't going on, right? I mean, so that's why war is completely necessary to Netanyahu and really to the Israeli project. But it's not enough to sustain the country. And again, the other thing that's happened is the Israeli military is very demoralized.
Yeah, I saw that. When Gallant pulled out, he had this interview that raised some eyebrows. Because in the interview, he pointed out, yes, the Hannibal directive was used on October 7th as it was taking place, meaning it was chaos, and we gave the order to kill our own if necessary. Now, those numbers have been in the hundreds, that the expectation is. We also found out that many of the things that they were saying were just lies. There were no babies, head chops off. This idea of women being raped, they have not necessarily been able to demonstrate it. But the fact that he admitted to, yes, we killed our own people, and yes, we did not do everything that we could to get the hostages back is big. Give the significance of it, the gravity of kind of that acknowledgement in the face of everything that was being said prior when this first happened.
Yeah, again, the premise of Zionism, and frankly, of any state that exists in the world, is that your state protects your own citizens. And when it's clear that Israel has not only failed to protect its own citizens, but that it killed its own citizens, not only on October 7th, but also in Gaza, right through this war, we know they've killed some of their own hostages. I assume mostly by accident, but that's happened. And of course, they've risked those people dying from starvation because they've starved out Gaza, even while the hostages have been there. What kind of state can survive when their citizens know that the state doesn't care about them and that they're completely expendable and can be killed if the state decides, that they will die? I mean, and so that's, again, when the smoke clears, people in Israel are going to be saying, so what's this state doing? What is this really here to protect Jews? I mean, it doesn't seem like it. And Jews around the world are going to ask the same question, and no one's going to want to move there. The young people aren't going to want to move there. Young Jews are not going to want to defend Israel. I mean, again, the project is collapsing under its own weight and under its own hypocrisy. So, yeah.
Is it fair to say that the collapse started on October 7th? And I know that might be gruesome just for some people to hear.
In earnest, yes. I mean, I do think that. I mean,
that's where the cracks are shown. Yeah, I guess that's what I'm getting across.
I mean, before October 7th, 2023, Israel was able to basically exist in the world with at least people pretending that it was a legitimate state and the only democracy in the Middle East, and again, that they were the good guys. After October 7th and how Israel responded to that, no one believes that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And that is death to Israel. I mean, that begins its decline, because even Jews don't believe that anymore, by and large. I mean, obviously some do, but I mean, I think a large percentage of Jews around the world no longer believe that. And when that's the case, Israel just can't exist. So yes, I do believe it began its horrible decline. Now, again, countries decline, states decline all the time, and they can take a lot of people with them going down. And of course, that they've been doing that, and I fear that they will try to continue that. But Israel, I think its days are numbered.
I guess we'll see. I mean, I think they would vehemently disagree. Like I said, they feel like they're winning. Why do you think there's a disparity between this view of we are winning, we're expanding, versus this is evidence of decline? I've seen, like, if you go online, if you go on YouTube, you will see thousands of videos saying Israel has lost, Israel is on its way out, a trap for Netanyahu has been set. All of these videos that predict this kind of degradation of the Israeli state, but they don't see it. And I guess why the dichotomy in viewpoints? Why the differences in one saying we are winning and the other side saying not so much, you're overextended, this is going to fail? I had Colonel Wilkerson on yesterday, and he effectively is saying something similar. This is a failure. Their military has been chewed up. Their economy is in tatters. So regardless of how they see it, there are real world phenomena that they are having to deal with that they are not necessarily, let's say, acknowledging with the gravity that it deserves. Nevertheless, that dichotomy and point of view remains. Why does one have the point of view of winning and the other one has the point of view of failure?
I think those who claim they're winning are either lying or just self-deluded. No state admits it's losing. No state admits it's leaving this world. No empire does that, right? One could say the same about the U.S. empire, which is declining, but who's going to admit that? No one in power is going to admit that. I mean, no one admits that when they're in power, right? They have to put on this happy face. We're winning, And again, Netanyahu can point to some battles it has won, but it has not won the war. Netanyahu, I do think, knows that too, right? I mean, okay, they took over, some parts of Syria, but again, how long can they hold that? They've taken over parts of South Lebanon. How long will they hold that? Apparently people in the north of Israel have not even moved back there yet because they don't believe they're safe there, right? Which matters more than whatever Netanyahu thinks or claims. So I think that's it. I just think it's, again, there's certain myths that have to be promulgated for a state to continue. And so, one is that Israel is eternally victorious. But of course, again, the U.S. claims that, and there's this kind of myth that the U.S. is like invincible. And yet, what war has it really won since World War II? It's lies. It's myths that people tell themselves, not just others. They tell themselves. But eventually, reality does catch up. It reminds me of it. There's a line in The Simpsons where Homer says something. Yeah, that's why America's so great and wins almost all the wars it fights, or something like that. It's an allusion to the fact that it doesn't win all the time. But we tell ourselves these things. That's why at the Super Bowl we have these, Air Force flyovers, and we have to try to convince ourselves of our own invincibility. And every country does that. But that doesn't change reality. Reality will assert itself.
What is the Middle East without Israel?
Well, again, hard to say. I think a lot of us would hope that peace would break out without Israel. That the biggest obstacle to peace not only in the Middle East, but frankly in the world, is gone. I mean, that is the hope. Again, I'm not Pollyannish enough to fully embrace that. Obviously, there will always be other tensions, other problems, other conflicts. But I do think it's a big start. It's a good start. Even Eisenhower recognized that, even way back then, what the Palestinian question was doing to Middle Eastern peace and world peace. I mean, everyone, Carter recognized that very, I think, much. It is the problem. It is the world question. If you look at the UN resolutions, Israel and Palestine have always disproportionately had the greatest amount of resolutions passed around them. It is the preoccupation of the world. And so I do think that it will be a major good for the region and the world.
I really wish Trump was going for that Nobel Peace Prize. And I really wish that in going for that Peace Prize, I'm going to end the war with in Ukraine, and does so in a way that doesn't, like, it seems absurd to me that we only can have vassals and enemies. And if Trump is like, okay, well, we can change that dynamic. We can actually have arrangements with these powers, whether it's China or whether it's Russia, without it being completely antagonistic in the way that we engage. And he looks at Israel in a similar fashion, saying, this doesn't have to be. I guess my thing is, if you look at Israel and say, okay, this doesn't have to be, I don't know if he also has, let's say, fortitude to be honest enough to say, okay, the issue is Israel. We need to do something about that. Or how do you see it? I mean, where do you think he's going to ultimately fall on this? Because what it's going to boil down to is what happens when Egypt and Jordan tell Trump no? What happens when Israel breaks the ceasefire agreement? And what happens going forward when that happens? Because that's what it boils down to, right? It's like either there is back to norm, where you have Gaza, you have the West Bank, you have Israel occupying Gaza in the way that it's controlling air, water, and that type of stuff. And you have it with its kind of apartheid state in the West Bank. I don't want to go back to that. But do you think that's what we are ultimately going back to?
I think if Israel breaks the ceasefire, what we go to is a regional war. I think Egypt will get involved. I think Jordan may get involved. And then all bets are off. Then I think, then what does the U.S. do? Is it going to go to war with Egypt? I don't think so. I think then again, I think it becomes unpredictable almost what's going to happen. That's why war is so dangerous, because you cannot predict the consequences of it. And I do think this is why I am guessing the Trump administration does not want that ceasefire to end, because they see that they may have a much bigger war on their hands than they had before. And again, that's why the Arab countries have a lot of power that they need to exert. They have a lot of leverage here. And if a country like Egypt says, hey, you go to war in Gaza, we're going to go to war against you, it would have a big impact on whether that war continues. So,
well, one last question on this one. If that's true, why haven't they done it up till
now? Because they depend so heavily on U.S. aid for their existence, basically. Egypt and Jordan both are very dependent on U.S. handouts, and so they don't want to give those up. But the thing is that Sisi, for example, and I think the King of Jordan as well, are facing the following problem. Yes, they need the money, but if they continue to bow to Israel and the United States, they may be overthrown, either in a popular revolution or in a military coup. Jordan's mostly Palestinians. Most of the military of Jordan are Palestinian. And in Egypt, the military which holds a lot of power, is very pro-Palestinian. So, they have a calculus to make. It's like, okay, I need the aid, but also I don't want to be hanging from a lamppost. So that's it. So again, this is where the people have power.
Preservation of the state. Yeah, I guess that would trump any kind of money that's coming into the country. Dan, man, thank you for this. I really appreciate it. I absolutely appreciate your take. Daniel Kovalik, he's an American human rights lawyer, labor rights lawyer, and peace activist. Daniel, what are you doing now? Where can people find you?
Well, I have my newest book that's out is The Case for Palestine, Why It Matters, Why You Should Care. I'd love for people to pick that up. I'm on Twitter at Daniel M. Kovalik, and I actually am writing a new book with Jeremy Kuzmarov, Syria, Anatomy of a Regime Change. So that'll come out in September.
Oh, that's interesting. Can you give me 2 minutes on that one?
Yeah, well, by the way, I just returned from Syria, and we're going to talk about, the many years attempt by the United States to overthrow not just the Assad governments, but even the first U.S. regime change operation was in Syria in 1946. We're going to talk about the long history of the U.S. attempt to control Syria through regime change.
Why was it so important for the U.S. to control Syria that they would invest that much time into going, like you said, even before the Assad government?
Yes, well, during the Cold War, Syria had very close relations with the Soviet Union, so it wanted to peel Syria off from the Soviet Union, as it did in many cases. But also Syria, while it hasn't always been 100% consistent on this, it has been a big supporter of the Palestinian cause even before the creation of Israel. And so the U.S. wanted to get another leader in who would not support the Palestinians. And that was a big issue they had with Bashar al-Assad. And we're going to go through that and through various negotiations that happened that show that a big reason they gunned for Assad was his support for the Palestinians.
Oh, that is super interesting. Daniel, thank you for this. You have a safe day. Be safe, man.
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure.
Absolutely. Oh, shout out to Daniel. Definitely appreciated him joining us. Definitely check out his book. There we are. Yeah, definitely check out his book. It's a great interview. Definitely appreciate him joining.